Italian Mafia boss walked in on his black Maid wearing his late wife's necklace. His reaction shocked everyone. "I see you, Amara Jackson," he said, his voice barely above a whisper as he stepped from the shadows. "I've always seen you." My heart stopped. The ruby pendant felt like it was burning against my skin as Dominic Ricci's eyes locked with mine in the mirror. I'd been caught red-handed wearing his dead wife's necklace, the most precious possession of a man who had people killed for far less serious offenses. But instead of rage, his face held something I'd never seen before: recognition. "It suits you," he said, moving closer. "Valentina would have thought so too. Have you ever had a moment when time seems to freeze? When your entire future hangs on the next few seconds?" That was me, standing in the library of Italy's most feared mafia boss, wearing jewelry that wasn't mine, waiting for a punishment that never came. This is the story of how a single act of curiosity changed everything. How a necklace meant for the dead brought the living back to life. The evening shadows stretched across the marble floors of Villa Montecito like spilled ink, marking the end of another day in the sprawling estate that had become both my sanctuary and my prison. I adjusted the feather duster in my hand, moving methodically through the West Wing's library, careful not to disturb the leather-bound volumes that hadn't been touched in years. 6 months I'd been working in this house. 6 months of polishing silver that never tarnished, dusting books that were never read, and avoiding the gaze of the man who owned it all. Dominic Ricci, whose name was whispered with fear throughout the city, whose footsteps sent the staff scattering like startled birds. I'd come to Italy seeking adventure, a far cry from my small-town Georgia upbringing. With a degree in art history and dreams bigger than my bank account, I'd found myself in Naples with dwindling funds and no prospects. The employment agency had been clear. The position at Villa Montecito paid triple the standard rate, but few lasted longer than a month. They hadn't mentioned why. I learned quickly enough. The villa wasn't just a home. It was the nerve center of the Ricci family's operations. Men in expensive suits came and went at all hours. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Doors were locked behind me. And always there was the unspoken rule. See nothing, hear nothing, say nothing. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9, its deep resonance echoing through the cavernous rooms. The rest of the staff had already retreated to their quarters in the East Wing, leaving me alone to finish the library, a task I'd deliberately saved for last. The night shift security wouldn't patrol this section for another hour. It was the only time the house felt like it could breathe like I could breathe. Mrs. Bellini, the housekeeper, ran the staff with an iron fist and a perpetual scowl. "Mr. Ricci values discretion above all else," she told me on my first day, her accent thick, her eyes cold. "You are to be invisible." Understood. I'd become very good at being invisible. So good that sometimes I wondered if I was disappearing altogether. I set down my cleaning supplies and moved toward the ornate mirror hanging between 2 towering bookshelves. My reflection stared back. Amara Jackson, 28 years old, dark skin contrasting sharply with the starched gray uniform that marked me as invisible in this house of secrets and whispers. "Who are you becoming?" I whispered to my reflection, a question I'd been asking myself more frequently lately. The woman in the mirror offered no answer. But tonight was different. Tonight, I reached into the pocket of my apron and withdrew the delicate gold chain I'd found earlier while cleaning Mr. Ricci's private study, a room I was only permitted to enter when he was away on business. The necklace had been tucked inside a small velvet pouch, forgotten in the back of a drawer I'd been instructed to organize. I'd known immediately whose it was. The entire villa was a shrine to Valentina Ricci. Her portrait hung in the main hall, her clothes still filled the master closet, her perfume bottles arranged on the vanity as if she might return any moment to select one. 3 years dead, and her presence was more palpable than that of any living person in the house. The pendant caught the lamplight, a teardrop ruby surrounded by diamonds that winked like tiny stars. I knew immediately it must have belonged to her. Valentina Ricci, the beautiful wife whose portrait hung in the main hall, whose name was never spoken, whose presence still haunted every corner of this mansion 3 years after her death. I should have reported finding it immediately. Should have handed it to Mrs. Bellini, the stern housekeeper who managed the staff with military precision. But something had stopped me. Curiosity perhaps, or a recklessness born from months of invisibility. With trembling fingers, I fastened the clasp around my neck, watching as the ruby settled against my collarbone. For a moment I wasn't Amara the maid but someone else. Someone who belonged in this world of wealth and power. It suits you. The voice froze me in place. Deep, accented, unmistakable. In the mirror's reflection, I watched Dominic Ricci materialize from the shadows of the doorway like a specter, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim hallway light. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't form words as he stepped into the room. His presence seemed to consume all the available oxygen, leaving nothing for my burning lungs. Mr. Ricci, I finally managed, my fingers flying to the necklace. I'm sorry, I was just... Don't. He raised a hand, stopping my fumbling attempt to remove the jewelry. Leave it. He moved closer, each deliberate step on the hardwood floor marking the countdown to my inevitable dismissal, or worse. I'd heard the whispers among the staff, the stories of what happened to those who crossed Dominic Ricci. The rumors painted him as ruthless, a man who had clawed his way to the top of Naples' underworld through cunning and calculated violence. They said he could charm politicians at dinner and order executions for dessert. That his smile never reached his eyes except when he was about to destroy someone. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that I could smell the subtle notes of his cologne, sandalwood and something darker, more complex. His eyes, the color of aged whiskey, studied me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. You found it in my study. Not a question. Sir. In the drawer you asked me to organize. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, steadier than I felt. I was going to return it tomorrow. I shouldn't have. Valentina wore it the night we met, he interrupted, his gaze fixed on the ruby. At the opera. La Traviata. She said it brought her luck. The unexpected confession silenced me. In 6 months I'd never heard him speak of his late wife. No one did. It was as if the entire household had entered into a silent agreement to preserve her memory by never acknowledging it. It didn't bring her much luck in the end, he continued, a bitter edge creeping into his voice. I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. The necklace suddenly felt heavy against my skin, weighted with history and grief I couldn't begin to comprehend. I'll return it now, I said softly, reaching for the clasp. No. His hand caught mine, warm and unexpectedly gentle. Keep it on. Just for a moment. Our eyes met in the mirror, his filled with something I couldn't decipher, mine wide with uncertainty. His fingers lingered on my wrist, the touch sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. You're afraid of me, he observed, releasing my hand. Everyone is afraid of you, Mr. Ricci. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. And yet you took the necklace. Heat rushed to my cheeks. I was curious. I shouldn't have been. Curiosity is not a sin, Amara. My name in his mouth sounded different, almost reverent. I hadn't realized he knew it. He moved to the liquor cabinet in the corner, selecting a crystal decanter. Would you like a drink? The question startled me more than his appearance had. Employers didn't offer drinks to their maids, especially not men like Dominic Ricci. I don't think that would be appropriate, sir. He poured 2 glasses anyway, the amber liquid catching the light. Nothing about this situation is appropriate. You wearing my dead wife's necklace. Me finding you here after hours. He extended 1 glass toward me. We might as well embrace the impropriety. Against my better judgment, I accepted the drink, our fingers brushing in the exchange. The whiskey burned a path down my throat, warming me from within. Why did you really take it? He asked, studying me over the rim of his glass. The truth spilled out before I could stop it. To feel something different. To be someone else just for a moment. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. And who did you want to be? Someone visible, I whispered. Something shifted in his eyes then. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. He set down his glass and moved closer, close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the slight silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. I see you, Amara Jackson, he said quietly. I've always seen you. The confession hung between us, altering the air in the room, changing everything and nothing all at once. You should fire me, I said, finding my voice again. Probably. He reached out, his fingers lightly tracing the chain around my neck, following it down to the ruby pendant. But I won't. His touch lingered at my collarbone, sending warmth cascading through me that had nothing to do with the whiskey. I should have stepped away. should have maintained the boundary between employer and employee. Instead, I remained perfectly still, caught in the gravity of his gaze. Why? I asked, barely audible. Because Valentina would have liked you. His hand fell away. She always said this house needed more life in it. More courage. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more tales that'll make your heart skip a beat. Trust me, what happens next between Amara and Dominic will leave you speechless. I didn't know how to respond to that, to being compared to the beautiful ghost whose presence still filled these halls. Keep it, he said suddenly, nodding toward the necklace. Mr. Ricci, I couldn't possibly. Not forever, he clarified. Just for tonight. Return it to my study in the morning. Before I could protest further, he turned and walked to the door, pausing at the threshold. And Amara? Next time you want to feel visible, you don't need jewels. Just knock on my door. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with the ruby that seemed to pulse against my skin like a second heartbeat. I raised my hand to the necklace, fingers trembling as they traced the contours of the pendant. In the morning, I would return it as instructed. I would resume my role as the invisible maid who dusted books and polished silver. But tonight I would allow myself to be the woman Dominic Ricci saw when he looked at me with those whiskey-colored eyes. The woman who was brave enough to wear a dead woman's necklace. The woman who was finally visible. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake in my small room in the staff quarters, the necklace hidden beneath my pillow, replaying the encounter in my mind. What had possessed Dominic Ricci to let me keep Valentina's necklace even for a night? What had he meant by that parting comment? And why did the memory of his fingers against my skin make my heart race hours later? Morning came too quickly. I dressed mechanically, tucking the necklace into my pocket, its weight a constant reminder of the previous night's surreal encounter. The staff breakfast was a quiet affair as usual. Mrs. Bellini presided over the long kitchen table, assigning the day's tasks with her customary efficiency. Amara, you'll handle the East Wing today. Mr. Ricci has guests arriving this afternoon. Her sharp eyes narrowed slightly. You look tired. I expect alertness from my staff. Yes, Mrs. Bellini, I murmured, avoiding her gaze. Did she know? Could she somehow sense the necklace burning a hole in my pocket? Marco, the groundskeeper's son who sometimes helped with heavy lifting around the villa, leaned toward me as Mrs. Bellini turned her attention elsewhere. You missed quite a show last night, he whispered. The boss came back from his meeting in a mood. Broke a glass in his study. No one dared go in. I nearly choked on my coffee. That must have been right before he found me in the library. What had put him in such a state? I wouldn't know, I replied carefully. I was cleaning the library. Marco shrugged. Lucky you. Far from the storm. If only he knew. After breakfast, I made my way to Dominic's study, heart hammering against my ribs. I needed to return the necklace before beginning my assigned tasks. The door was closed. I hesitated, then knocked softly. Enter. I stepped inside, immediately struck by the contrast to the previous night. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the rich mahogany furniture, the leather-bound books, the man himself seated behind his massive desk. Dominic looked up from his papers, his expression unreadable. Amara. My name again, in that voice that somehow made it sound like more than just a name. I've come to return this, sir. I withdrew the necklace from my pocket, holding it out to him. He set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. Did you sleep with it under your pillow? The question caught me off guard. How did you? Valentina always did. A shadow crossed his face. Said it gave her good dreams. I placed the necklace on his desk, careful not to let our fingers touch. Thank you for not firing me. It won't happen again. What won't happen again? Your curiosity? Your honesty? He picked up the necklace, the ruby catching the sunlight. Those are rare qualities in this house, Amara. I wouldn't be so quick to abandon them. Before I could respond, the door opened behind me. I turned to see a tall, elegantly dressed woman with ash blonde hair and cold blue eyes. She stopped short at the sight of me, her gaze flicking from my face to the necklace in Dominic's hand. Sophia, Dominic said, his tone shifting to something cooler, more formal. You're early. Clearly, she replied, her Italian accent more pronounced than his. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at me. I didn't realize you were occupied. I was just leaving, I said quickly, moving toward the door. Stay. Dominic's command stopped me in my tracks. He turned to Sophia. This is Amara, one of our staff. Amara, this is Sophia Bianchi, my sister-in-law. Valentina's sister. The resemblance was there in the high cheekbones, the proud posture, though Sophia lacked the warmth that radiated from Valentina's portrait. Charmed, Sophia said in a tone that suggested anything but. Her gaze fixed on the necklace again. I see you found it. Yes, Dominic replied, his expression giving nothing away. It turned up. How fortunate. Sophia's smile didn't reach her eyes. I thought we agreed it would be buried with her. The tension in the room thickened. I stood frozen, caught in a current I didn't understand. Plans change, Dominic said simply. He turned to me. That will be all, Amara. Please see to the east wing as Mrs. Bellini instructed. I nodded, grateful for the dismissal, and slipped past Sophia. As I closed the door behind me, I heard her voice, low and accusatory. What game are you playing, Dominic? I didn't hear his response, but the question echoed in my mind as I went about my duties. What game was he playing? And why did I feel like I had somehow become a piece on the board? The east wing of Villa Montecito was rarely used except for guests. Today I was to prepare 3 bedrooms for Dominic's visitors. As I changed linens and dusted surfaces, I found myself wondering about these mysterious guests. Business associates? Friends? In 6 months I'd never seen Dominic entertain socially. In the largest guest room I paused before a photograph on the dresser. One I hadn't noticed before. It showed a younger Dominic with his arm around Valentina, both laughing on what appeared to be a yacht. The Mediterranean sparkled behind them, as blue as Valentina's eyes. They looked happy, carefree. Nothing like the brooding, dangerous man who now haunted these halls. She was beautiful, wasn't she? I nearly dropped the photograph. Sophia stood in the doorway, watching me with those cold eyes so unlike her sister's. Yes, I agreed, carefully replacing the frame. She was. And kind. Sophia entered the room, running her finger along the dresser top as if checking for dust. Too kind for this world. Too trusting. There was something accusatory in her tone that made me uneasy. I never had the privilege of meeting her. No, you came after. She fixed me with a penetrating stare. Tell me, Amara. That is your name, yes. How did you come to work for my brother-in-law? Through an employment agency in Naples, I answered truthfully. 6 months ago. And you're American. Not a question. Far from home. I wanted to see the world, I said, uncomfortable under her scrutiny. Experience different cultures. And instead you found yourself here. Sophia's laugh was brittle. Cleaning the house of a man like Dominic Ricci. Tell me, do you know what he does? Who he is? I chose my words carefully. I know Mr. Ricci is a businessman with many interests. Is that what they call it now? Interests. She moved closer, her expensive perfume enveloping me. Let me give you some advice, girl to girl. Whatever you think is happening between you and Dominic, whatever he's led you to believe, it will end badly. For you. My cheeks burned. There's nothing. I saw the way he looked at you. The way he spoke your name. Her eyes flashed. And I saw my sister's necklace in his hand while you stood there. Don't play innocent with me. You misunderstand, I insisted, my heart racing. I was simply returning. Sophia. Dominic's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous. I believe we have matters to discuss. In private. Sophia's smile was all teeth. Of course, dear brother. I was just getting acquainted with your staff. She brushed past him, pausing to add, we'll continue our conversation later. Dominic remained in the doorway after she left, his eyes on me. Are you all right? The question surprised me. Sir. I'm fine. Sophia can be protective of her sister's memory. He seemed to choose his words with care. Don't take her comments to heart. She loved her sister, I said simply. I understand that. Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, perhaps. Finish here, then take the rest of the afternoon off. My guests will be arriving soon, and I prefer to limit the staff's exposure to them. Yes, sir. I hesitated, then added, may I ask who's coming? His expression closed off. No, you may not. Some questions are better left unasked in this house, Amara. With that warning he left me to my work, the ghost of Valentina Ricci watching from her silver frame. I finished preparing the guest rooms and retreated to the staff quarters as instructed. Most of the other employees were still working, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I changed out of my uniform into jeans and a simple blouse, then sat by my small window that overlooked the rear gardens. From this vantage point I could see a black Mercedes pulling up to the side entrance of the villa. 3 men emerged, all in expensive suits, all with the hard eyes and watchful posture that marked them as dangerous. One carried a sleek leather briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. As they entered the villa, Dominic appeared to greet them. Even from a distance I could see the transformation. Gone was any trace of the man who had spoken so gently to me the night before. This was Dominic Ricci, the businessman, the power broker, perhaps even the criminal that rumors painted him to be. I shivered, suddenly aware of how little I truly knew about the man whose house I cleaned, whose secrets I was unwittingly becoming entangled in. What had I gotten myself into? Don't forget to hit that like button if you're dying to know what happens next. Who are these mysterious visitors, and what does Sophia know about Valentina's death? Comment below with your theories. I read every single one. The meeting in Dominic's study lasted for hours. From my window, I watched the gardens darken as twilight descended, the security lights clicking on to illuminate the manicured paths. The staff was instructed to serve dinner in the formal dining room and then make themselves scarce, unusual even by Villa Montecito's secretive standards. Curiosity gnawed at me. What business could keep men like that locked away for so long? What was in that handcuffed briefcase? I should have heeded Dominic's warning about questions better left unasked. But something about the previous night had shifted something in me, awakened a part that had been dormant since I arrived in Italy. The part that asked questions. The part that wanted answers. As darkness fell completely, I slipped out of my room. The staff quarters were quiet. Most had retreated early, grateful for the unexpected free time. I made my way through the service corridors, avoiding the main halls where I might be spotted. Years of cleaning the villa had taught me its secrets. Which floorboards creaked, which doors needed oil, which passages were rarely used. I reached the small alcove outside Dominic's study undetected. It was a service nook, designed to allow staff to wait discreetly until summoned. From here I could hear the muffled voices inside, though not clearly enough to make out words. I was about to leave. This was madness after all, when the study door suddenly opened. I pressed myself into the shadows of the alcove, heart pounding. Not negotiable, one of the men was saying, his accent distinctly Russian. The price has changed. We had an agreement, Petrov. Dominic's voice was cold, controlled. Changing terms at this stage is bad business. Business changes, the Russian replied. Especially when we learn certain information. They moved into the hallway, forcing me to shrink further into the shadows. 4 men, Dominic, the 3 visitors, and Sophia trailing slightly behind. I hadn't realized she was part of the meeting. What information? Dominic demanded. The Russian Petrov smiled thinly. About your wife's death. About what she discovered before her. Unfortunate accident. The air seemed to freeze. Dominic's face transformed into something I barely recognized. Rage and grief warring beneath a mask of control. Be very careful, Petrov, he said, his voice deadly quiet. You're a guest in my home. A guest with leverage, Petrov replied. He nodded to the man with the briefcase. Double the original sum or the documents go to the authorities. You have until tomorrow night. They moved down the hallway toward the guest wing, leaving Dominic and Sophia alone. I held my breath, praying they would follow. Instead, Dominic turned to Sophia, his expression murderous. You told them. She lifted her chin defiantly. They already knew most of it. I simply confirmed what they suspected. You betrayed your own sister's memory. His hands clenched at his sides. For what? Money? Revenge? Justice? Sophia hissed. You think I believe that story about her suicide? Valentina would never. Enough. Dominic cut her off. We'll discuss this later. In private. They moved away, their voices fading. I remained frozen in place, my mind reeling from what I'd overheard. Suicide? The staff whispered that Valentina had died in a car accident. But suicide? And what documents could the Russians possibly have that would give them leverage over someone like Dominic Ricci? I waited until I was certain the hallway was empty before slipping back toward the staff quarters. As I rounded a corner, I collided with a solid chest. Going somewhere, Miss Jackson? I looked up into the face of Antonio, Dominic's head of security. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were hard. I couldn't sleep, I stammered. I thought a walk might help. In this part of the house? His eyebrow rose skeptically. Far from your quarters, close to the boss's study? I wasn't thinking about where I was going, I lied. I'm sorry. I'll return to my room now. Antonio studied me for a long moment. The boss seems to have taken an interest in you. That can be dangerous, for everyone involved. A warning, not a threat. I nodded, understanding the distinction. I'll escort you back, he said, gesturing for me to precede him. We walked in silence through the darkened corridors. At my door he paused. Some advice, Miss Jackson? In this house it's better to be deaf and blind. For your own safety. With that cryptic warning he left me. I closed my door and leaned against it, heart still racing. What had I gotten myself into? And more importantly, how could I extract myself? Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of rubies that turned to blood and whispered conversations I couldn't quite hear. I woke early, exhausted but too restless to remain in bed. The villa was quiet as I made my way to the kitchen. To my surprise, Mrs. Bellini was already there, preparing coffee with sharp, angry movements. Good morning, I ventured. She turned, her expression even more severe than usual. Miss Jackson. I was about to send for you. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. Is something wrong? Several items have been reported missing from the guest rooms. Her eyes bored into mine. A gold watch, a pair of cufflinks, and a wallet. I stared at her, uncomprehending. I don't understand. The rooms you prepared yesterday. The ones only you had access to before the guests arrived. She set down her coffee cup with a sharp click. Mr. Petrov reported the theft this morning. The Russian. The same man who was attempting to extort Dominic. I didn't take anything, I said firmly. I prepared the rooms as instructed and left. Your word against his. Mrs. Bellini's mouth thinned to a disapproving line. And Mr. Ricci values his business relationship with Mr. Petrov. This is absurd, I protested. Why would I steal from guests? I've worked here for 6 months without incident. Your room will need to be searched, she continued as if I hadn't spoken. Standard procedure. Fine, I agreed, anger replacing shock. Search it. You won't find anything because I didn't take anything. Mrs. Bellini's expression didn't change. We'll see. An hour later, my room had been thoroughly searched by Antonio and another security guard. As I expected, they found nothing, until Antonio checked beneath my mattress. What is this? He asked, holding up a gold watch and a wallet. I stared in disbelief. That's not, I didn't. I stopped, realizing how futile my protests would sound. I'm being set up. Antonio's expression gave nothing away. You'll need to come with me. They escorted me to a small sitting room I'd never entered before. A place for private conversations, judging by its isolated location and thick walls. Dominic was already there, standing by the window, his back to the door. Leave us, he said without turning. Antonio hesitated. Sir, given the circumstances. I said leave us. Dominic's tone brooked no argument. When the door closed, he finally turned to face me. His expression was unreadable, his eyes shadowed. Sit down, Amara. I remained standing. I didn't steal anything. I'm being framed. I know. The simple acknowledgement stunned me into silence. Petrov is not a man who misplaces possessions, Dominic continued. Nor is he a man who makes accusations without purpose. Then why? To discredit you. He moved away from the window, closing the distance between us. The question is why he would bother. What does he gain by removing a maid from my household? Understanding dawned. He thinks I know something. Dominic's eyes sharpened. Do you? I hesitated, weighing my options. Lying seemed pointless. He would see through it immediately. But the truth might be equally dangerous. I overheard part of your conversation last night, I admitted. About your wife. About documents. His expression darkened. You were eavesdropping. Not intentionally, I defended myself. I was passing by and heard raised voices. In a part of the house you had no reason to be in. His voice was dangerously soft. After being explicitly told to remain in your quarters. I lifted my chin. Yes. Dominic studied me for a long moment, his gaze intense. You're either very brave or very foolish, Amara Jackson. Probably both, I conceded. To my surprise, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. At least you're honest about it. The smile vanished as quickly as it had appeared. But it doesn't change the situation. Petrov believes you overheard something significant. Something that makes you a liability. I didn't, I insisted. Just vague mentions of documents and your wife's death. At the mention of Valentina, his expression closed off completely. That's more than enough to make you dangerous in his eyes. What happens now? I asked, suddenly aware of how precarious my position was. Dominic moved to a small bar cart in the corner and poured himself a drink, not offering me one this time. Now I have a decision to make. About whether to believe me or Petrov, I said. He took a slow sip of his drink. No. I already told you I know you didn't steal anything. His eyes met mine over the rim of his glass. The decision is what to do about the fact that you've become entangled in something far more dangerous than you realize. Before I could respond, the door opened. Sophia stood there, her cold eyes taking in the scene before her. The staff is waiting for your decision, Dominic, she said. Mrs. Bellini wants to know if she should call the police. That won't be necessary, he replied. Miss Jackson will be leaving Villa Montecito today. My heart sank. You're firing me. I'm saving your life, he corrected quietly. Pack your things. Antonio will drive you to Naples. Dominic, Sophia began, clearly displeased with this resolution. It's done, he cut her off. See to our guests. Tell them the matter has been handled. After she left, closing the door with more force than necessary, Dominic turned back to me. You have 1 hour. Take only what you need. I don't understand, I said, confusion and hurt warring within me. If you know I'm innocent. This isn't about guilt or innocence. He set down his glass and moved closer, his voice dropping to ensure we wouldn't be overheard. Petrov is dangerous. If he believes you know something, he won't stop at planting evidence. The only way to protect you is to remove you from his reach. By firing me, I said bitterly. By giving you a chance to disappear. His eyes held mine. Antonio will take you to an apartment in Naples. You'll stay there until I resolve this situation. And if you can't resolve it? His expression hardened. I always resolve my problems, Amara. One way or another. The implication sent a chill down my spine. This was the Dominic Ricci that rumors spoke of. The man who eliminated obstacles with ruthless efficiency. Go pack, he said, his tone softening slightly. And Amara? Trust no one. Not even me. With those ominous words ringing in my ears, I left to gather my meager possessions, wondering if I'd ever see Villa Montecito, or its enigmatic owner, again. If you're on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. What secrets did Valentina discover before her death? Is Dominic protecting Amara or sending her away for a darker purpose? Drop your theories in the comments. The story's about to take an explosive turn you won't see coming. The apartment in Naples was small but comfortable, located in an anonymous building on a narrow street far from the tourist areas. Antonio had driven me there in silence, his only words a gruff instruction to stay inside and wait for contact. He'd handed me an envelope containing enough cash to last several weeks, a burner phone with a single number programmed into it and a key. The boss will be in touch, he'd said before leaving me alone in the unfamiliar space. That had been 3 days ago. 3 days of pacing the small rooms, watching the street from behind curtains, jumping at every sound. 3 days of wondering what was happening at Villa Montecito, what dangerous game was being played between Dominic and the Russians. 3 days of touching my collarbone, remembering the weight of Valentina's necklace, the look in Dominic's eyes when he told me he saw me. On the 4th morning, restlessness overcame caution. I couldn't remain caged in this apartment indefinitely, waiting for a call that might never come. I needed air, sunlight, the reassurance that the world still existed beyond these 4 walls. I dressed carefully in the clothes Antonio had purchased for me, simple items that wouldn't attract attention. Before leaving, I checked the burner phone again. Still no messages. With a sigh, I tucked it into my pocket and ventured outside. Naples in autumn was beautiful. The oppressive summer heat had given way to golden sunshine and gentle breezes. I walked aimlessly through the narrow streets, savoring the simple pleasure of anonymity. Here I wasn't Amara the maid or Amara the suspected thief. I was just another face in the crowd. I found a small cafe with tables spilling onto the sidewalk and ordered an espresso. As I sipped the bitter coffee, I allowed myself to imagine a different life. One where I'd come to Italy as a tourist, not a desperate job seeker. One where I'd never set foot in Villa Montecito or heard the name Dominic Ricci. You shouldn't be out in the open. The voice beside me sent my heart racing. I turned to find Sofia Bianchi sliding into the chair across from me, her ash-blonde hair hidden beneath a scarf, dark sunglasses concealing her eyes. "How did you find me?" I demanded, glancing around for signs of others watching us. "I followed Antonio the day he brought you here." She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep or tears. "We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you," I replied, preparing to leave. "You helped frame me." "I did no such thing." Her hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. "That was Petrov's idea. I merely didn't intervene." I yanked my arm free. "Why are you here, Sofia?" She glanced around nervously before leaning closer. "Because Dominic is going to get himself killed, and for some inexplicable reason I think you might be the only person who can stop him." That stopped me cold. "What are you talking about?" "He's meeting with Petrov tonight. Alone." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He thinks he's negotiating, but it's a trap. Petrov never intended to sell those documents. He's using them as bait." "Why would you warn me? You clearly hate me." "I don't hate you," she sighed, suddenly looking exhausted. "I hate what you represent. Another woman falling under Dominic's spell, blind to who he really is. Just like my sister." "I haven't fallen under anyone's spell," I protested. Sofia's laugh was bitter. "The way you look at him says otherwise." She leaned back in her chair. "But this isn't about you or me or our feelings. This is about justice for Valentina." "You think Dominic had something to do with her death?" I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. "I know he did." Her eyes flashed with conviction. "Valentina wasn't suicidal. She was scared. The week before she died, she called me frantic. Said she'd discovered something terrible, something about Dominic's business. She was going to leave him. And then she died in an accident," I said slowly. "An accident that was remarkably convenient for a man whose wife was about to expose his criminal activities." Sofia's mouth twisted. "The police ruled it suicide, said she drove off that cliff deliberately. I never believed it." "What does this have to do with Petrov?" "The documents he has, they're Valentina's." Sofia's voice caught. "Her evidence. She must have sent copies to someone for safekeeping, someone who eventually sold them to Petrov." My mind was racing. And now Petrov is using them to blackmail Dominic. Not just blackmail. Sofia's eyes met mine. Destroy him. Petrov and Dominic have been rivals for years. This is his chance to eliminate the competition permanently. Why tell me this? Why not go to Dominic directly? He won't listen to me anymore. She looked away. Not since I confronted him about Valentina. But he trusts you. God knows why. I shook my head, overwhelmed. Even if what you're saying is true, what am I supposed to do? I'm stuck in this apartment and I have no way to reach him except... I stopped, remembering the burner phone. "Except what?" Sofia pressed. "Nothing," I said quickly. "I need to think." She stood, replacing her sunglasses. "The meeting is at midnight. At the old Crusoe warehouse by the docks." She dropped a piece of paper on the table. "This is my number. Call me when you decide what to do." After she left, I remained at the cafe, my coffee growing cold as I turned over her words in my mind. Could I trust her? She'd admitted to not intervening when Petrov framed me. But her concern for Dominic had seemed genuine, despite her suspicions about his involvement in Valentina's death. And what about Dominic himself? "Trust no one. Not even me," he'd said. What did that mean? Was he capable of arranging his wife's death as Sofia believed? I thought of the man who had looked at me in the library mirror, who had spoken of Valentina with such raw grief, who had touched the necklace around my throat with reverent fingers. Could that man be a murderer? I didn't know what to believe. But I did know one thing. I couldn't sit by and do nothing if Dominic was walking into a trap. Back at the apartment, I paced for hours weighing my options. Finally, as evening approached, I took out the burner phone and dialed the only number programmed into it. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. I told you to stay inside. Hello to you too, Antonio, I replied. I need to speak with Dominic. Not possible. His tone was clipped. The boss is occupied. It's urgent, I insisted. Tell him it's about Petrov and the meeting tonight. Boss. How do you know about that? Just tell him, I urged. Please. The line went silent for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then Dominic's voice came through, tense and controlled. Amara. What do you know? It's a trap, I said without preamble. Petrov doesn't want to negotiate. He wants to eliminate you. And how exactly did you come by this information? His tone was dangerous. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. Sophia found me. She said Petrov has documents that belong to Valentina. Evidence of some kind. She thinks you're walking into an ambush. A long silence followed. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. Sophia has her own agenda. You shouldn't trust her. Should I trust you? I challenged. Did you have something to do with Valentina's death? Is that what Sophia told you? The edge in his voice could have cut glass. She said Valentina discovered something about your business. That she was going to leave you. That her accident was too convenient. And you believe her. Not a question, a resigned statement. I don't know what to believe, I admitted. But I do know that walking into that meeting alone tonight is suicide. Another silence, this one heavier. Why do you care, Amara? Why warn me? The question caught me off guard. Why did I care? This man was dangerous, possibly a murderer, definitely a criminal. I should be running as far from him and his world as possible. Because you saw me, I said finally, the truth surprising even me. When I was invisible to everyone else, you saw me. A sharp intake of breath was the only indication my words had affected him. Stay in the apartment, he said after a moment. Lock the doors. I'll handle this. Dominic. Goodbye, Amara. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, frustration building. He wasn't going to listen. He was still going to that meeting, still walking into whatever Petrov had planned. I couldn't let that happen. The decision crystallized with surprising clarity. I would go to the warehouse myself. I didn't have a plan beyond that, but I couldn't sit in this apartment knowing Dominic might die tonight, especially if I could have prevented it. As darkness fell, I changed into dark clothes and slipped out of the apartment. The Caruso warehouse wasn't far, a relic from Naples' industrial past, now abandoned and decaying on the edges of the harbor. I took a taxi as close as I dared, then walked the rest of the way, staying in the shadows. The warehouse loomed against the night sky, its broken windows like empty eye sockets. I circled the perimeter, looking for a way in that wouldn't expose me. A small side door hung partially off its hinges. My entrance. Inside, the warehouse was a cavernous space filled with shadows and the distant drip of water. Rusted machinery created a maze of hiding places. I moved carefully, listening for voices, for any sign of Petrov or Dominic. A faint glow from the far end of the building drew me forward. As I crept closer, I could make out a cleared area where several men stood around a makeshift table. Petrov was there, along with 2 of the men who had visited Villa Montecito. Of Dominic there was no sign. I edged closer, straining to hear their conversation. He's late, one of the men said in Russian accented English. He'll come, Petrov replied confidently. He has no choice if he wants these. He patted the briefcase on the table. And when he does? The other man asked. Petrov's smile was cold. We finish what should have been done years ago. No negotiations, no deals. Just an unfortunate accident, like his wife. My blood ran cold. Sophia had been right. This was an execution, not a meeting. I needed to warn Dominic, to stop him from entering this trap. I began to back away, planning to find a safe place to call him, when my foot connected with a piece of metal. The clang echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. The men at the table froze, then Petrov barked an order. Footsteps approached my hiding place. I pressed myself against a rusted machine, hardly daring to breathe. Check the perimeter, Petrov commanded. Find whoever that is. I was trapped with armed men closing in and nowhere to run. As I frantically searched for an escape route, a hand clamped over my mouth from behind, an arm like iron around my waist. Don't scream, a voice whispered in my ear. It's me. Dominic, are you holding your breath right now? I know I am. Hit that like button if you're shocked by these revelations. What really happened to Valentina? Is Dominic innocent or guilty? And how will they escape this deadly trap? Comment below with your predictions. The final part will leave you absolutely speechless. He pulled me deeper into the shadows, his body shielding mine as one of Petrov's men passed within feet of our hiding place. When the footsteps receded, Dominic released me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and concern. What the hell are you doing here? He hissed. Saving your life, apparently, I whispered back. They're planning to kill you. I know. His jaw tightened. I've known from the beginning. I stared at him in confusion. Then why come at all? Because I needed to see the documents for myself. His gaze shifted to the briefcase on the table. I needed to know what Valentina found. The raw pain in his voice struck me. This wasn't the calculated move of a crime boss. This was the desperate act of a man still haunted by his wife's death. You didn't kill her, I realized aloud. His eyes snapped back to mine, surprise momentarily replacing anger. No, he said softly. I didn't. Before I could respond, more footsteps approached. Dominic pressed me against the wall, his body a shield between me and discovery. We stood frozen, barely breathing until the danger passed. We need to get out of here, he murmured, his lips close to my ear. Follow me. Stay low. We crept through the warehouse, using the machinery for cover. We had almost reached the side door when a shout went up. There. By the door. Gunfire erupted, bullets pinging off metal around us. Dominic shoved me toward the exit. Run. I burst through the door into the night, Dominic right behind me. More shots rang out as we sprinted down the alley. A car waited at the end, engine running, Antonio behind the wheel. Go. Dominic shouted as we dove into the back seat. The car lurched forward, tires squealing as Antonio accelerated away from the warehouse. I glanced back to see Petrov's men emerging, guns raised. Are you hit? Dominic demanded, his hands running over my arms, checking for injuries. No, I'm fine, I gasped, still catching my breath. You. He ignored the question, turning to Antonio. The villa's compromised. Take us to the safe house. Antonio nodded, navigating the car through Naples' narrow streets with practiced precision. I leaned back against the seat, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. That was incredibly stupid, Dominic said after a moment, his voice tight with controlled fury. You could have been killed. So could you, I retorted. What was your plan? Walk in alone and ask nicely for the documents. I had backup, he nodded toward Antonio. And unlike you, I'm accustomed to dangerous situations. Well, your backup was still in the car when I found you, I pointed out. So maybe my stupidity saved your life. Antonio's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, a hint of respect in them. Dominic stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. You're either the bravest or the most foolish woman I've ever met, he said, echoing his words from days earlier. You've mentioned that before, I replied. I still think it's both. The safe house turned out to be a modernist villa perched on a cliff overlooking the Bay of Naples, its glass walls offering panoramic views of the moonlit water. Antonio left us there with promises to return in the morning, the purr of the car's engine fading into the night. Inside, the villa was minimalist and elegant. All clean lines and open spaces, so different from the ornate opulence of Villa Montecito. Dominic moved through the rooms with familiar ease, turning on lights, checking security systems. You should rest, he said, gesturing toward a hallway. There are bedrooms down there. Choose whichever you like. I'm not tired, I replied, following him into the kitchen where he was pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. I want answers. He handed me a glass, his fingers brushing mine. What do you want to know? Everything, I said simply. Starting with Valentina. Dominic's expression darkened, but he nodded. He led me to a seating area overlooking the bay, the lights of Naples twinkling in the distance. For a long moment he stared out at the view, gathering his thoughts. Valentina and I met in Rome, he began finally. I was there on business. She was studying art history. It was unexpected. I wasn't looking for a relationship, especially not with someone so removed from my world. But you fell in love, I prompted when he fell silent. A sad smile touched his lips. Completely. She was like sunlight, warm, bright, illuminating everything she touched. He took a sip of his whiskey. I tried to keep my business separate from our life together. She knew I wasn't entirely legitimate, but not the extent of it. I wanted to protect her from that darkness. What happened? I asked softly. 3 years ago she started asking questions. She'd found financial documents in my study, evidence of money laundering through art galleries. Galleries owned by Petrov. His jaw tightened. I should have told her the truth then, but I was afraid of losing her. So I lied. Said it was a misunderstanding, that the documents were part of an investigation into Petrov's activities. She didn't believe you. No. His voice was heavy with regret. She was too smart for that. He started digging deeper, collecting evidence. I didn't know until it was too late, until she confronted me with everything she'd found. Not just about Petrov, but about my entire operation. He stood, moving to the window, his back to me. We argued. She threatened to go to the authorities. I told her she was being naive, that Petrov would kill her before she could testify. We said terrible things to each other. The pain in his voice was palpable. I waited, giving him space to continue. The next day she was gone. Left a note saying she needed time to think. His hands clenched at his sides. 2 days later her car went off a cliff on the Amalfi Coast. The police ruled it a suicide, but I never believed that. Valentina would never. His voice broke. You think Petrov had her killed? I said, the pieces falling into place. Dominic turned back to me, his eyes haunted. I know he did. But I couldn't prove it. The documents she'd collected disappeared from our home. I've spent 3 years searching for them, for any evidence that would link Petrov to her death. And now he has them, I said. He's using her own evidence against you. The ultimate irony. Dominic's laugh was bitter. The documents that could have destroyed me are now the only things that might prove he murdered my wife. I set down my glass and moved to stand beside him at the window. That's why you were willing to walk into a trap tonight? To get those documents? Yes. He looked down at me, his expression softening. And then you showed up and ruined my plan. Your plan would have gotten you killed, I pointed out. Perhaps. His hand rose to my face, fingers gently tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Thank you for caring enough to try to stop me. The touch sent warmth cascading through me. We stood there, suspended in a moment of connection that transcended employer and employee, criminal and innocent, past and present. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Now we find another way to get those documents, he replied. And to make Petrov pay for what he did to Valentina. I raised an eyebrow. You're already involved, Amara. His expression grew serious. After tonight, Petrov will be looking for you too. We're in this together now, whether we like it or not. The reality of my situation hit me fully for the first time. I couldn't go back to my old life, couldn't pretend none of this had happened. I was entangled in Dominic Ricci's dangerous world, bound to him by circumstances neither of us had chosen. I never wanted this, I said softly. I know. His eyes held mine. I never wanted to drag you into my darkness. From the moment I saw you wearing Valentina's necklace, I should have sent you away. Far away from me and everything I touch. Why didn't you? His thumb traced the line of my jaw. Because when I looked at you that night, I saw something I thought I'd lost forever. A chance at redemption. At feeling something other than grief and rage. The confession hung between us, altering the air in the room, changing everything and nothing all at once. Dominic, I began, not sure what I wanted to say. A sharp ring cut through the moment. Dominic stepped back, pulling a phone from his pocket. His expression changed as he listened to the caller, hardening into the mask of the businessman, the crime boss. When? He demanded. Are you certain? Another pause. Keep her there. I'm on my way. He ended the call, his eyes meeting mine with new urgency. That was Antonio. Sofia just showed up at Villa Montecito demanding to see me. She claims she has information about Petrov's plans. Do you believe her? I asked, remembering her warnings at the cafe. I don't know. His expression was troubled. But I need to find out. I'm coming with you, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Stay close to me. If this is another trap. I know the risks, I assured him. I'm choosing them. Choosing this. Something shifted in his eyes. Understanding, perhaps. Acceptance. He reached out, his hand finding mine, fingers intertwining. Then let's go face them together. As we left the safe house, the ruby necklace that had started everything seemed to pulse between us like an unspoken promise. I didn't know what awaited us at Villa Montecito. Danger, betrayal, perhaps even death. But for the first time since I'd come to Italy, I felt fully alive, fully visible. No longer the invisible maid, but a woman who had found her courage in the most unlikely place. In the shadows of a world she never meant to enter, beside a man she never meant to care for. Whatever came next, we would face it together, bound not by fear or obligation but by something far more powerful. Something that had begun the moment Dominic Ricci had looked at me in that library mirror and truly seen me. The moment I had finally become visible. Wow, what a journey. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales that'll make you feel all the emotions. Did you expect that twist with Petrov being behind Valentina's death? I'm dying to hear your thoughts in the comments. What do you think happens next for Amara and Dominic? Their story might be just beginning. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most unexpected connections change our lives forever. Red Heart.